taken into account NFPA 921 once its effect was clear on the Willingham case. This is about the duty of the fire marshal's office to correct.
You will have an opportunity to comment after this, and should the commission come to a recommendation on what it's going to do to a report, to submit written replies before any report is adopted.
Well, my simple question to you, because we did submit this letter, and I can tell by the way that the committee has responded to it, that it's not answering the question we asked, and I think that you should ask about the duty to correct. So I only ask the opportunity to address you for whatever 3 or 4 minutes you'll give me and direct your attention to this letter before you vote. That's all I'm asking.
And I decline to do that. You'll have opportunity.
I ask for a vote of the commission as to whether I should be given that opportunity.
I don't think that I have to take a vote on that.
Well, I'd ask some commissioner at least give me the opportunity to make this point. We've been down a long road here, and I just ask for that fair hearing.
Well, before I vote, I would like a little bit of time to research, to look at some documentation. I'll just say that. And I did have one other comment. Back on point with kind of what you're saying. I'm going to refer to the panel's recommendations and kind of quote from that. It recommends that before the report is finalized, should the FSC think it's appropriate, the panel would ask for opinions of experts in Texas and give some examples of those experts, whether the new NFPA 921 standard of practice has been accepted and placed in practice at the time of the arson investigation. I would think that that is a sound recommendation, but I think that it may be proper to get that done before the panel finally votes, because that would, I think, address some concerns that were rightfully brought up. And that's a panel votes, the commission votes. I think that would address some concerns that were rightly brought up. To extend that a little bit, and Dr. Carradine, this kind of goes back towards what you were saying about the it's clear that that was not the standard at the time that the arson investigators were out there at the site of this fire investigating for those particular investigators. But they certainly had to have some sort of standard custom that they did engage in when they were doing this investigation. What I find insufficient in the Biden report is what that was in Texas at the time.
It's pretty hard to figure what that is.
And, you know, we may never be able to figure it out, but in the materials that we have, and I would certainly request the input of the other panel or the other commission members as to are there any other means that we can go to try and determine that. I know even from Dr. Byler's report that it was fairly nebulous at the time, but these guys had training at somewhere, and if we can establish the level of that training, then we could say conclusively they were negligent on that level of training or they were not negligent on that level of training. So any input from commissioners in terms of what has been done, what materials that I may have missed that talk about that level of training. And for that reason, in addition to going back and doing what the panel recommends regarding NFPA 921 standard of practice, which again, I would submit that we need to do that for the we may need to investigate whether we can go back and talk to some other maybe local Texas experts that were around at that time and figure out kind of what the standard of training was that these guys would have had and compare what they did in Willingham versus that standard and see if they were able to do that. Your response?
Right, and that's exactly, you touched on the important point that the commission members are aware of because it's in the recommendations document, but to clarify that our next recommendation was to specifically request from various parties whether or not those published standards in the scientific literature were generally accepted by fire investigators at the time. We're not done. We're going to solicit more input, and we are proposing another meeting for the sole purposes of resolving the Willingham case September 17, 2010. So we don't expect to finalize it today.
That's all I wanted to
and that's in the panel, that's in your recommendation.
Because there was some language in it that made me think that we were going to, the panel may ask for a decision on Willingham and then go back and do that, which that's clearly wrong.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that should be clarified, that we recommended that we were going to solicit that feedback because it was our sense that there was going to be a lag time. From looking at the Byler report, he's clear on that. That was the overall belief of the panel members, but we wanted to confirm that. We were going to put together a list of individuals that we would send that information to. I had the benefit of speaking with some fire scientists that advised me personally. I would like to think that we would send letters to those folks. People like John DeHaan, people like Lentini. We want feedback from all of them with this very specific question. Was the science accepted by fire investigators at the time? And then we would make a decision September 17th, because clearly we realized that it wasn't going to get done today. These are the preliminary thoughts.
Can I make a suggestion from a legal standpoint that might help? And it kind of goes in line with sort of the path that's recommended here, and that is to take comment. It sounds like what you're really talking about doing is making a tentative finding for notice purposes only, that this is the direction that the commission is looking at this point. And so this is, tentatively we're looking at the idea that this may be a lack of evidence or insufficient evidence for a finding of negligence. You're putting that out for comment because it's a little bit different direction. It's certainly a different direction from the Byler report. So make a tentative finding for notice purposes only, to put it out for the complaining party to respond, to put it out for the responding parties to respond, and anyone else that would like to comment on this direction that you're taking. And then it will come back again with the comment that's coming in with it. But at least it gives notice to these folks that this is a tentative finding, and this is what we're looking at. We want to hear if you have a response to that. It serves as notice to them that this is a new direction. But the final decision would not be made until, and it still sort of tracks what's in here, and the actual final decision and final document would not be issued until people have responded to that notice of the direction that you're headed, and the commission has been able to incorporate that and listen to that and come back at a later meeting and then do a final finding at that point, one way or the other.
And Barbara, that very much echoes what Sarah was just saying and what we had prepared and contained in our panel recommendations. That's exactly what we talked about, is having a vote today, and essentially the motion would be something along the lines of there is insufficient evidence to conclude that there is negligence or misconduct, insert appropriate phraseology. The investigative panel, if that was approved as a potential conclusion, would begin to draft a report. In the meantime, we would also seek additional input on the grounds that Sarah was just talking about, helping us focus on the status of the standard of practice for the time period that we're talking about, and seeing to what extent people more familiar with the Texas standard at that time agree or disagree, and then coming back together. And we had proposed a date of September the 17th. Our normal meeting, the quarterly meeting, was in October. We thought we ought to have a separate meeting in advance on September the 17th, at a location to be decided, for the sole purpose of finalizing that report in language and giving an opportunity to people like the complainants in the case through a comment period to submit written comments or come in and give oral comments, and for the commission then, by the conclusion of that day, to finalize the report and adopt something.
May I also recommend that we do communicate with Dr. Byler and suggest that we have read his report, and some of us have concluded that in fact we are concerned about whether or not this practice was established in Texas or not, what he's suggesting, and whether he is aware of what was the standard of care or practice in 1991 and early 1992.
For Texas.
For Texas, and if he does have that information, then he should provide this information to us.
I would let the committee, or let the commission know that we had actually done some preliminary contact with Dr. Byler about that, and he was resistant to answering that question unless he was paid some more money. So if we are going to pursue that, the commission would have to approve paying him something beyond the $20,000 or $30,000 he's already been paid. He thinks to answer questions he should be paid, and I forget how much an hour he thinks he's worth. $250 an hour to answer.
Right, but for